it's not as good as the original. This tends to be the case with video game remakes, or at least I think so anyway. The fact of the matter is, Persona 3 was a game of its era. A timeless game of its era, no doubt, but a game of its era nevertheless. What made it great and significant had everything to do with the people who made it and the design sensibilities of the era. You strip all of these things away, as Reload does, and what you're left with is a strange husk that appropriates someone else's vision, and only makes superficial changes that attempts to appeal to modern design sensibilities, which aren't always good. Everything I've just said probably doesn't mean a whole lot if you view video games like a PC, where you can make objective improvements by putting in newer and more advanced components. If, however, you're more like me and you view video games more like a painting, then you've come to the right place. And this won't be one of those soulless IGN reviews that blindly praises a game just because it's new and shiny. I'm not going off of vague 20-year-old memories of playing this game on the PS2, and I haven't only played the recent port of P3P. I played all of them recently, and there's 4 hours of content on this channel that can attest to it. I don't think it's unfair to say that I have a bit more of an informed opinion on Persona 3 than most. That's not me saying I'm an authority or you should take my word as gospel, I'm just letting you know that this review is coming from a place of love, not hatred. Although there will be plenty of that. Sega, perhaps wisely, chose not to send me review code for this game. It's like they knew I wasn't gonna like it. Or perhaps they're still mad that I shit on Sakura Wars a few years ago, who knows. The nicest thing I can say is that it mostly does a decent job of maintaining the story from the original game. This isn't like the RE4 remake where the tone and voice acting have been completely butchered. Assuming you're playing in Japanese, that is. The English dub has a completely new cast now, and I didn't feel like giving it the time of day to get used to it, so I can't really comment on its quality. The only reason I played these games in English in the first place is because Atlas forced me to, but those days are now long over. Unfortunately, no matter what language you play this in, there's no escaping Koromaru's terrible new voice. In the original game, he sounded like, well, a dog. Now he just sounds like a voice actor doing terrible bow wow dog noises, making it impossible for me to get invested in his character at all. Oh, but at least you can pet him now, something they only put in here for that stupid fucking Twitter account. Still, it's obviously a better way of experiencing the story than portable, and it even builds on top of the PS2 version to an extent with some more dynamic cutscenes. Lots of close-ups and different angles, as opposed to the typical lockdown long-shot approach the original game had. What they did with the ending in particular is fantastic and far and away my favourite part of this remake. Even if there's some distracting compression artifacts going on in these pre-rendered movies. Would it have killed them to make the file size a few gigabytes bigger so these aren't as compressed? We're in the future of gaming where all kinds of things are possible, except for high quality FMVs apparently. They look like they're being streamed off an anime piracy website. The new linked episodes are a great addition and more than make up for the lack of social links for your male party members. They're shorter than the social links that were exclusive to the female route in P3P, but they're just as good. I particularly enjoyed the new content involving Shinjiro that gives us more insight into the original C's team. The only one of these I didn't enjoy was Koromaru's because, again, he sounds like someone in a fursuit doing dog noises. But the rest is stellar. There's more cutscenes involving Ryoji, which turn him into an even more Karo Nagisa-esque figure, and a few involving the members of Strega, most notably Takaya. They try to build a little bit more of a personal bond between him and the protag here. I didn't really feel like it added anything to his character, but it didn't hurt things either. One thing Reload gets right with its graphics are the character models. I have no issues with them, they're fantastic. But it also drops the ball in other places. And I'm talking about some small, insignificant places either. I remember the Dom getting a lot of flack when the trailers were first released, but I wanted to hold my judgment. Having now played it, yeah, they were right. The Dom is one of my favourite areas in video game history. It's such a cozy, homely location with great music and an atmosphere that works for the entirety of the game. When it becomes more depressing towards the end, those shadows and muted colours take on a whole new meaning. Reload's version ruins everything though. The colours are eye-bleedingly bright, which doesn't suit the tone of some of the later cutscenes, like the one I'm showing on screen during New Year's. They seem to have realised this, so the colour palette abruptly changes for the last month of the game, They wouldn't need to have changed it if they got the colours right the first time around. It's also just a very unsubtle way of trying to change the tone. Oh look, the colours are muted now, be more depressed. It's such a bizarre artistic direction to me because you see this area so much throughout the game. You'll be looking at this room more than any other and it's almost the worst looking part. Everything just looks flat and uninteresting now. Well, at least the music's still good, right? Reload's soundtrack is terrible and actually made me dislike Lotus Juice. He's at his worst here and he's in like every song on the soundtrack. You can't escape Lotus Juice. There's overbearing Lotus Juice here. I was half expecting him to show up during Memories of You and start throwing down bars.
Getting out of my bed, gonna get some hair, gonna go downtown, better not be dead, gonna fight nicks, gonna fuck chicks, gonna get up, gonna suck dicks.
It feels like it has a little too much reverence for Lotus Juice. And I suspect it's because he's like the only guy who worked on the original game that returned. Some of the few original songs are alright, but whenever the game remakes a song from the original, it's always inferior without exception. I'm sure there'll be some people in the comments section telling me it's actually better, which is always the case whenever I talk about bad remixes in Persona games. So I'm just gonna preemptively tell you that you're wrong. Anyway, back to the visual side of things. The game looks nice for the most part, but it has the habit of fumbling where it matters the most, and this is especially the case with the final boss. Considering how Nyx is the most visually striking part of the original game, I thought they were going to go all out for the remake. Most JRPGs tend to go all out on the final bosses in general. So you can imagine my shock when it turned out to be the worst looking part of the entire game. The graphics barely look better than the PS2 version, and the art direction is abysmal. You only need to look at them side by side to see the downgrade. There's a lot less stuff going on in the background, and whoever thought it was a good idea to bathe this entire battle in green did not know what they were doing. Too bright, the mood's ruined. The beautiful composition is gone as well. If you showed me this and said it was some fan-made Atlas Hire This Man Unreal Engine remake, I'd believe you. By the way, this fight is known for its high difficulty, as we all know, but this version is super easy for reasons I'll get into in the next section. Reload's Tartarus is bad, and I just know without even looking anything up there's going to be a ton of people saying it's better now. Yes, on a very superficial level, the Tartarus in this game looks a bit nicer and more varied than the one from the original, but it also lost everything that made it mechanically fun to explore in the first place. You know what a dungeon crawler is, right? It's the genre this entire franchise was built on top of, and Persona 3 was a great evolution of its core ideas. You'd often find yourself having to make difficult decisions while exploring Tartarus. Do you fight the enemies and remove them as a possible threat, or do you run past them, which will certainly aggro them and block off the path behind you? Since the dungeon always changes its layout, you could never be certain of these decisions, but you were always making them, which made it engaging to play. Reload's Tartarus has none of this. You can run past every enemy, you're never in any danger of getting caught by one of them, and they despawn after a certain amount of time. The only reason you would ever get in a fight here is if you went out of your way to do it, which kind of undermines the whole idea that they're here to impede your progress. You know, they're enemies. And I can't believe I have to say this, but a dungeon where the enemies aren't even a threat isn't fun. You can still collect treasure in this version of Tartarus, but this also despawns enemies. So there's no decision making to be done there either. The earlier blocks of Tartarus don't even have any dead ends for you to run into. It's quite apt that they've rounded off all the corners, just in case you cut yourself on them. It also brings back all the changes that Portable made to make things easier, because of course it did. Like being able to resume from the highest floor you reached. This undermines the teleporters as your means to escape at the expense of your progress. I don't get why they don't just let you leave whenever you want at this point, they might as well. A lot of the time you have to like go in this menu and go through the floors until you get to one with a teleporter so you can leave. It's just inconvenient. As an enjoyer of the original Tartarus, there was nothing for me here, and I can't imagine there's anything for people coming from Persona 5 either. This is quite possibly the most boring and toothless JRPG dungeon ever made. And yeah, like I said, it is a bit more interesting visually, but not by much, surprisingly enough. It's randomly generated still, but only when you leave Tartarus for the evening and come back. So on the last day of the game, you don't get any new layouts to mess around with. Layouts that you map out stay mapped out, and you can always continue to the next floor if you know where the stairs are. This gives you yet another means of getting yourself out of sticky situations. Not that you'll ever find yourself in one. Even the dark floors in this game just show you where everything is on the map. I have no idea how you're supposed to accidentally run into the Reaper in this version. Did you know that he could follow you to different floors now? You probably didn't, because there's no reason you'd ever see him unless you were farming for him. They did absolutely everything in their power to make this as boring and easy as possible. I blame those people who bitched about Tartarus and AI party members for the last 20 years. It's all very lame. Even Persona 5's Mementos was a better version of Tartarus than this place. But surely the battle system is still good, right? Well, they also kinda did the same thing to that as well. In fact, I would say that Persona 3 Portable was way better on the gameplay side of things. Reload has these new outfits. The game is so proud of these, they get an entire animated cutscene dedicated to just introducing them. I mean, I already wasn't a fan of these from the trailers, but I definitely wasn't a fan after this cutscene tried to sell me on them so hard. I guess it's a taste thing at the end of the day, but I do feel like they just add unnecessary details to iconic Soejima designs. You can change back to the old ones, but only for battles and Tartarus exploration. They always show up in the cutscenes. Anyway, these outfits are tied to a new mechanic called Theurgy, which is super attacks that you can activate after a certain amount of time in battle and carry over to subsequent battles as well. All of the boss fights are balanced around you using them, and they're incredibly overpowered and make the game easy. I had to keep asking myself if I was over-leveled, because some of the bosses can be taken out by only a couple of these. Yes, they can be satisfying to use at times, and the animations are really nice, but they come at the expense of everything that might have made the gameplay fun. This is an evolution of the Showtime mechanic from Persona 5 Royal. A mechanic I was never really a fan of, but at least it didn't completely destroy the balance in that game. It was just some nice bonus damage you got every now and then. But the Theurgy mechanic takes it too far. These things completely ignore resistances, so you're always going to spam them to win battles. The game also doesn't introduce anything new to make things harder either, other than making poison extremely debilitating, and every enemy and boss during the endgame having Heat Riser. This can be easily dealt with Decage Debilitate though, so it almost doesn't matter. At the end I stopped fighting random enemies altogether and just went straight to the boss fights and the newly added Monad boss fights, and was still destroying everything with ease, even on hard mode. The only implementation of the Theurgy mechanic that I liked was with the protagonist's fusion spells. He doesn't actually get his own special Theurgy attacks, he gets his fusion spells. This is a nice way of implementing them, and a definite improvement over Portable in that regard. Still, it's kind of disappointing that they didn't implement all of the fusion spells from the original. In fact, I don't even think they did half of them. Also, don't think I didn't notice that the protag can only use one-handed swords. Atlus once again got lazy on that. This isn't the first time Persona 3 has been messed with. The first two iterations on the PS2 are the most artistically cohesive, and what I would generally recommend to anyone wanting to experience Persona 3 for the first time. Portable overhauls the battle system and borrows elements from 4 at the expense of the difficulty, such as full party controls and how the one mores work. If Atlus had any interest in actually making a true remake of Persona 3, they would have brought back the AI-controlled party members from the original, with some improvements to the AI itself of course. But instead the battle system here is mostly based on P3Ps, only it's been made significantly worse. Why is the rush command so slow now? This is the most spineless remake they could have done. I suppose I should just be grateful it's still turn-based at least? I'm sure those people who wanted that definitive version of Persona 3 are gonna cope about this remake's flaws for generations to come. But for me, I already got the best version of Persona 3 all the way back on the PS2. Is it perfect? No, and it never needed to be. It's a painting with some flaws that could never be replaced by a nicer looking one, especially if that nicer looking one is also worse in a lot of places. Persona 3 never needed to be remade. If I never see a remake of one of my favourite games ever again, it will be too soon. I consider this to be the new worst mainline Persona game. At the very least, I can look forward to Hashino releasing another banger later this year with Metaphor. In any case, I'm done talking about Persona 3. please don't remake 2 next. As always, a special thank you to my channel members and patrons.
Don't bother me now. I'm just waving goodbye to the crowd. I'm dead. Sacrificed myself for my friends. Coming out, coming at you. It's the end of the game. This shit won't lame. Coming up, in my bed. Gonna have some, gonna eat some French toast, or as I like to call it, egg bread.